Hi, this is James Gordon Octorley here with my third graphic novel review. Today's graphic novel I'll be talking about today, The Killer, written by Matz, illustrated by Jacamon. This was first published by Casterman in October 1998. This was published by Archaia Studios in 2022. I discovered this graphic novel after seeing the movie of the same name, directed by David Fincher. And I enjoyed the film, so I was really eager to check out the graphic novel as it seemed like there was a lot more to the story than what the film covered. And while I enjoyed the first few chapters of this graphic novel, the first few chapters are really good, but then towards the later chapters, it's where it starts to get kind of slow and boring, and kind of went in some directions I didn't like, and then the final chapter I did not like at all. I found it bleak and depressing. Um, so yeah, I didn't like the last chapter that much at all. But the first few chapters are really good. Like it's very well written. The illustrations are excellent. There's a lot of moments of violence. Not much gore, but just a lot of violence and stuff. And the main character, the killer, is this dark, ruthless hitman he's skilled in what he does. He rarely makes mistakes during his jobs, and his methods are always brutal and they work. And the character himself is dark, twisted, and even disturbing at times. As uh, the comic focuses a little bit on his personal issues and stuff, and things that are going on psychologically in his mind. There are some other characters we do follow in the story. There are some characters I liked, other characters I didn't. They're very well written and layered and stuff. And overall, I really enjoyed this. Now, the film and the graphic novel are two completely different things, so they're not identical. Um, I'll explain more in my review what the film kind of just borrows from the graphic novel as the story it's based on the first chapter is very different from this in the graphic novel. Um, the worst. Overall, I still enjoyed it. I kind of wish the last act could have been a lot better, but overall, I still enjoyed it, and I definitely will be checking out more graphic novels by Matz. This author, he's a French writer who was actually born in the Caribbean. He's the writer for the screenplay Far Cry, the 2004 first-person shooter game. And there's another graphic novel I like to check out, Bullet to the Head, which was made into a film by Walter Hill. I like to check that out. But overall, is still an interesting read. I have to say though, it's not for everyone. It is kind of dark and bleak at times. Oh yeah, I should mention this complete edition, which I just got back in November. There are 13 chapters in total, and this thick graphic novel. There's like 13 chapters, and for my review, I was kind of was originally was going to try to reword reword the first two chapters into like a single page, and then because I don't want to give away too much, but I couldn't really figure out how to do it. So what I'll be doing is I'll be covering the first five chapters in this graphic novel. As I said, there's 13 chapters in this graphic novel. All right, onto the review. Chapter 1: Law and Fire. A highly skilled and ruthless French assassin known as the Killer has been waiting in an apartment building in Paris for 5 days for his target Martini to show as he's gotten a sniper rifle with an itchy trigger finger. While waiting, the killer reflects on his past as he was trying to get into law school during college back in his early 20s, but after a night of having sex with a woman, she makes an offer for him, knowing a guy who will pay him a lot of money if he can kill a man. The killer meets an old man who offers a large sum of money if he can bump off a target in the New York subway. The killer accepts and uses a baseball bat, beating his target to death. After his first job, the killer goes and buys a gun and begins his life as a hitman and recounts some of his later jobs in Paris. Fast forward to the present, the killer has a few rules he follows and has no pity for his targets regardless who they are. All he cares about is killing them and getting paid, which he plans to retire in Venezuela and able to spend his money without anyone asking questions. However, the killer is suffering from nightmares of his past targets coming after him, which he brutally murders them again. He also fantasizes about going on a killing spree during his stay in Paris while looking at people below the streets of Paris with a sniper rifle. Losing his insanity, the killer tries to commit suicide with his pistol but suffers a misfire. He believes his time isn't up yet. By the 12th day, Martini finally shows up with a large number of guests. The killer barely makes it in time to his room. The killer quickly gets his sniper ready. However, he kills all of Martini's guests in the building across the street before killing his target. As the killer tries to make a quick escape, he is followed by a cop that catches a flight with him as he's going back to Venezuela. Chapter 2: The Vicious Cycle. Returning home to his girlfriend, the killer enjoys spending time fishing, hunting, and having sex, feeling his mind is clear now. Living in the thick jungles while driving a red 63 Thunderbird, he visits some friends who inform him that a French man has been asking around for him and is driving a green SUV and unknowingly has been watching him. The killer tracks down the Frenchman in the jungle as he injures his hand after grabbing thorns and slips in the river. The killer holds him at gunpoint with his rifle. He demands to know who he is. The Frenchman refuses as the killer shoots him in the leg, asking again, who is he? Still he refuses and the killer snaps, beating him to death with the rifle butt, only to stop in horror as he's losing it again. After disposing of the body with the aid of crocodiles, the killer goes to the hotel of the Frenchman and learns he's a cop. The killer goes back to Paris and visits his handler, Edward. The killer wants to know why a cop was following him. Edward is concerned this might bring unwanted attention to them. The killer wants his payment now and is quitting. Edward is unable to pay him full, but offers another job to give him some extra money. The killer accepts and goes to Switzerland to kill his target, Alan Baylarge. However, the killer feels something isn't right about this contract. While at a bar talking with a woman, the killer sees a breaking news story which has a man speaking on live TV and his name is the target but is a different guy. He confronts his target in the bathtub demanding to know why he is hired to kill him. The man doesn't know who he is and knows nothing about the job. The killer plugs in an electric shaver, turns it on, then throws into the tub, electrocutes him, and then quickly flees back to Paris to confront Edward. However, upon returning to Edward's office, he finds his handler hanging above the ceiling. The killer takes a briefcase full of money and is coming back to Venezuela. Before catching a flight, the killer calls his girlfriend, letting her know that he's coming back home. However, she informs him that someone came by and was asking for him. The killer fears his life and girlfriend are in danger and won't be retiring anytime soon. Chapter 3: The Debit. When the killer returns home, waiting for him is Mariano, the godson of a powerful Colombian crime boss, Perino. Mariano explains after the hit in Paris brought the killer under the radar of Perino, explaining it brought them bad business and owes them for debit. To pay off his debit, Perino wants the killer to do a few jobs for him. Knowing he has no choice, the killer brings his girlfriend with him as they act like a couple on vacation. When the killer meets Perino, he explains what he wants from him and in return will pay for each hit he does. However, Mariano will join him to ensure he carries out the hit and he doesn't try to escape. The killer raises his price and Perino accepts. The killer's first job is killing Commissioner Aguaden, who's cracking down on drug business. Mariano brings him a sniper rifle, but the killer rejects his idea and goes for a different plan of killing his target. Using cable and silenced pistols, both the killer and Mariano climb down a building under the cover of darkness as Aguayan is with a call girl and has no security with him. They sneak inside and kill both of them. The killer and his girlfriend return back to Venezuela with Mariano accompanying them. She overhears their conversation and learns what her boyfriend really does for a living. Mariano will come for him when it's time for the next job. While driving back, his girlfriend wants to know more what it's like to be a hitman. When Mariano returns for his next job, this time the killer goes alone, leaving his girlfriend back home. Reaching New York, both he and Mariano enjoy themselves before doing the job. They ambush their targets by ramming their Jeep Grand Cherokee into a Chevy SUV. Both the killer and Mariano take out their targets. Returning to Colombia, the killer believes he's paid his debit and wants his money now. Mariano drives him out of Colombia and tells him to take care. Chapter 4: Blood Ties. After paying off his debits, the killer takes a long vacation for himself by traveling along the river in the northern section of South America. Upon his return, the killer finds his home destroyed and his girlfriend badly injured. All she remembers is that her attackers spoke Spanish and wanted to know the whereabouts of him. She didn't tell them anything. As his girlfriend is recovering and his house being rebuilt, the killer begins searching for the attackers, wondering if someone wanted revenge for a hit he did or he was betrayed by someone he worked for. While laying low in Paris, the killer reaches out for Mariano for help. Padrino is able to find the three men that attacked his girlfriend as she recognizes them. While a cop friend of the killer's, Antonio, looks after the killer's girlfriend, he goes to Spain where Mariano has captured all three men. They give him the name of Bisclay. When offered a pistol to finish them off, the killer pulls out a knife and hacks all three men to death. From the information they could gather, Bisclay is head of a health ministry who helps corrupt politicians and anyone else earn dirty money, and his target in Paris also worked for Bisclay. Both the killer and Mariano ambush Bisclay by ramming his car off the road in the city. The killer blasts away at the driver and bodyguard in the passenger seat with a Uzi. Mariano attempts to get Bisclay out of the car, but police suddenly show up and wound both the killer and Mariano. The killer dispatches the cops but is forced to let Bisclay go, with the killer and Mariano fleeing the scene. Chapter 5: The Killer Instinct. After recovering from their wounds, the killer and Mariano track down one of Bisclay's girlfriends, who Mariano seduces her, and she reveals where Bisclay is hiding out. In his country house, the killer and a small squad of Mariano's men assault the house, taking out all the guards and capturing Bisclay. Both the killer and Mariano question Bisclay after beating him and revealing who sold him out. Bisclay explains he, Martini, and Juan run a scamming business, and Martini was involved with the Colombians. Bisclay tries to reason with Martini and not rush business, but refused to listen. So Bisclay paid Edward to hire the killer to assassinate Martini. Edward was also working for Bisclay, and after what happened to the cop who followed the killer, fearing it would bring them heat on them, Edward hired a hit on the killer, then hunt himself. Bisclay also adds they are going to scam the Colombians with the aid of Hitman Worms, a dirty politician who has lots of power, wealth, and muscle to do whatever he wants. Worms also has ties with the Russian mob, as well as he deals with drugs dealing. After getting all the information they want, the killer blows Bisclay's brains out. When Padrino learns that he was going to be used by Bisclay, Worms, and Juan, he declares war on Worms. Padrino offers the killer €1,000,000 to kill Worms, as he wants to send a message to those who mess with Padrino. The killer accepts. The killer begins stalking Worms, learning his routine, his work, and life while plotting how to do assassination. He plans to use an armor-piercing incendiary rounds and rupture the fuel tank of Worms' car. On the day of the hit, the killer uses the van as cover to assassinate Worms. Once he enters his car, the killer fires at the fuel tank, blowing the car up. However, Worms' escort fires back and wounds him. He is able to kill them off and returns back to his hideout with his girlfriend treating his wounds. 2 months later, the killer and his girlfriend return to Venezuela. The Killer is a dark, twisted, and violent story of a ruthless yet deadly hitman who keeps his real identity a secret, follows a list of rules to ensure he doesn't fail on his job, and gets paid for assassinating his targets, and later finds himself working for the most cruel and deadliest criminal organizations on the planet. With his killer instincts and methods of assassination, the killer rarely fails on his job, but sometimes questions his actions or the hit he's been paid to do. There are many layered and well-crafted characters within the story we follow, with some playing out in major roles and others small roles. The killer himself, a dark, mysterious, and disturbed person who comes close a few times of losing his insanity and refuses to think about his past as it bothers him. The first few chapters were well written and illustrated, as I liked the rich detail within the story along with the moments of action I got. However, within each chapter, the killer reveals a lot of dark and disturbing moments in human history, which makes the killer less evil than how he views the rest of the world as a cold, dark, and violent place with the human history written in blood. However, towards the later chapters is when the story begins to slow down and go to places I didn't like, and found some of these later chapters boring, with the final one very bleak and kind of depressing. I was expecting much more action, more guns, and a high body count, but didn't get that. I wish the later chapters were about the killer doing different jobs for other clients while facing off against a agency that was after him, and would have made the later chapters a lot better. I also liked how early on the killer is suffering from his nightmares with his past targets out to get him and has to kill them each time more brutal than before, along with his killing spree fantasies that we didn't get to see more of and didn't get a nightmare scene towards the end of the graphic novel. I wish there were more of that in the story. As for the 2023 film of the same name, while it's loosely based on the early chapters of The Killer but changes a lot around with the plot, only the two characters, the killer and his girlfriend, are in the film. Nobody else from the graphic series makes an appearance. While the film is still violent in a few parts, but the graphic series is way darker and has more to its plot as the film cuts out a lot of story elements and characters. Still, it's worth a watch as I liked it and I'm a big fan of David Fincher's work. However, I do wish for a sequel that can cover more of the later chapters in the Killer series and maybe improve on the story to make it better than the later chapters in the graphic series. Overall, I highly recommend The Killer. It has rich detail and well illustrated story with moments of action you'll enjoy along with the dark yet skilled hitman. However, don't go in reading this expecting huge amounts of fast-paced action. This is more story-driven as it takes a while for things to happen within the story, but when it does deliver the action, it's always quick, bloody, and sometimes brutal. If you're a fan of 70s and 80s crime thrillers, then The Killer has what you want, but if you want something that's fast-paced and more hardcore action, then I would say pass on The Killer, as some might find its pacing a bit slow for them. And that's a review today. Hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, I enjoyed The Killer despite the later chapters I didn't like, but overall I still enjoyed it. The very first few chapters I would say are the best. They're very well written. The illustrations are excellent. The artwork is just incredible in it. There's the characters we come to know and follow in the story. Some we don't get to really know much about. But some we get to know a little more about their lives and stuff. So the characters are very well crafted. The killer himself is a very kind of dark and twisted individual who like really enjoys violence. He doesn't get off on it, but he enjoys it. And the one thing I really liked in the beginning of the graphic novel is that he is suffering from personal issues with himself, being haunted by his past targets, and then him fantasizing and going on a killing spree. That's only like in the first chapter of the graphic novel, and later on, like a little bit in the story, like he just seems to begin kind of like losing his insanity, and like is like on the brink of like snapping of like going on a killing spree. Unfortunately, we don't get more of that. Unfortunately, I was hoping there would be more of that, but there's not. So that was one thing I was kind of hoping for. It's because I was thinking, okay, there's gonna be a part where he's like assembling a weapon, and then he looks out and sees all these people, and then fantasizes on using the weapon on these people, but that doesn't happen. Um, One thing I noticed when reading the chapter, I can see where the film took inspiration from the early chapters, like the first one, chapter 4, and yeah, like the very first I would say like the very first like 4 or 5 chapters I think is where they got the inspiration for the film, but they, as I said, they cut a lot out of it to make the film. Like they cut a lot of the characters out. They changed the plot around, and I actually liked it. Even though I enjoyed the movie, but the whole part where the killer just massacres Martini's guest, then before finishing off the target, that I liked more because it was a lot more brutal. The film changed it to where the killer goes to shoot his target but ends up hitting someone else instead by accident, and that's the major difference with the film and stuff. Or actually, when I was reading the killer, it kind of reminded me a little bit of the Hitman video games, kind of like a little similar, where basically you play as a ruthless hitman that's basically is especially trained in assassination and do these different jobs and stuff. That's where it kind of reminded me of. But that's the other thing I wish in the graphic novel is that the killer does other jobs for other clients, because later on he starts doing more jobs for these with the two Colombian characters most of the time, and then I was like, isn't he gonna do other jobs for someone else? Like, is he just gonna keep getting the same jobs from the same guy? And it doesn't really change that much. I was kind of like getting bored, and like towards the end, it started to get kind of slow, and I'm not going to reveal what happens later on, but later on it just gets slow. I find the stories now kind of getting boring, and the final chapter I felt was really disappointing. It doesn't go to this big grand finale as I thought there was going to be. It's very kind of kind of bleak and depressing. As I was like, really, you're gonna end the final chapter like this? You're not gonna do something else? oh. Hmm. Oh, oh yeah, another thing I should mention. In the graphic novel, the killer does not listen to the Smiths while doing his job. That was something they added in the film. Um, but I still enjoy the film for what it is. I enjoy David Fincher's films, not all of them, but the films I do enjoy. I do like his work, and he does a really good job on the killer. David Fincher didn't write the script for the film. That was Kevin Andrew Walker who wrote the script. The guy that wrote the screenplay for the movie Seven. So like to me to me both the film and the graphic novel are both good. However, if you want more action and more violence, then I would say go with the graphic novel. But the film is still worth a watch in my opinion. Uh, Apparently there's a sequel series to the killer that follows, I guess, after the events of the chapter 13. So if there's English translations of that, I will definitely get those and check those out and see if the story gets more interesting or it doesn't. So I'll have to look into that. All right, that's it for the view today. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will have to figure out what my next graphic novel review is going to be. I got several ideas I'm going to pick, but for my next book, I will begin reading this. Oops, I'll begin reading this later today. Mindhopper by James B. Johnson. So I'll get started on this later on tonight. All right. All right. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and don't forget to subscribe to Archaia Library, the YouTube channel, and the Facebook group of the same name. And please support your review of fiction. Until then, I'll catch you later.